As we move through this morning, you're going to learn in a number of ways how the Synod on Young People, Faith, and Vocational Discernment was groundbreaking. And one way in which it was groundbreaking was that young people were involved in all the key moments, not only in the planning of the Synod, but also present at the Synod, making interventions and being part of the working document, which you have a copy of. Nicole Perone joined a group of young adults from all over the world with the task of putting together the working document that would guide the conversation and the direction of the Synod. Nicole is the Archdiocesan Director of Adult Faith Formation in the Archdiocese of Hartford, Connecticut. Before taking that position, she served as the Communications Officer at the Leadership Roundtable on Church Management, and she was a chaplain at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. Nicole is passionate about the lay mission and vocation and the role of women in church and society. It's a particular delight for me to be introducing Nicole today because I first met her when she was a student exploring the roles of women in the church, and she came to interview me. And so it's so nice to see that she herself now is a leader, both at the local level, the national level, and even through the Synod, we can say the universal level. And so please join me in a very warm welcome for Nicole.
So thank you for having me today, to Father Frank and Susan and Riley, and thank you all for being here on this beautiful day. I know this is a nice change of pace from the high school setting, so I hope you're getting a moment of refreshment before you go back into your ministries. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of framework about the Synod to just give an introduction outline that will hopefully provide some good context and guide the rest of your conversations today. So Susan gave a beautiful introduction to me, and so I just want to underscore that the reason that I'm here is because I was a delegate to the pre-synod, amongst the other kind things that Susan said, and so that is the lens from which I'm going to speak today. I do want to do my little campus ministry plug. I am a product of Catholic high school campus ministry, and so I just want to rejoice in what you do, and I can say most definitively that the fostering of my faith and the nurturing of my leadership potential occurred in the hallowed halls of Immaculata High School in Somerville, New Jersey. And so I, on behalf of the thousands of young people whose lives you will touch, thank you. You don't even know where those seeds are going to bear fruit, so thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's get right to it. The first order of business is, what is a synod? I think that sometimes we use a lot of church language and we don't always take the time to think about what it actually means. We sometimes brush right on past it and assume that everybody knows everything that we're talking about, so I certainly don't want to do that today. What is a synod? So a synod of bishops brings together bishops from around the world to discuss important and timely topics that affect the life of the church in a fraternal way with the Pope, who is a bishop as well, and their brother, as well as their leader. So a synod draws special attention to a particular topic so that the church can channel its energies and resources toward that particular topic. It's not to say that a variety of ministries aren't important, a variety of demographics aren't important, but it draws special attention to something that needs a lot of energy. The 15th Synod had as its focus young people, the faith, and vocational discernment. And as we all know, I'm preaching to the choir, this is a particularly timely topic in the life of the church, given that so many young people, and we experience this in the United States, are disaffiliating with the church. They cease to practice or they leave altogether. So this is extremely relevant to us, but really also in the global context. By having this focus for the Synod, the church is underscoring how important young people are, not only as members of the church, but also people to whom we minister in a special way. And just a small note, in some places you might see the Synod referenced as the Synod on Youth, or the word youth used. I use young people here because there's a little language confusion sometimes. In the synodal languages, most notably in Italian, the word used is giovani, young, and it's sort of this broader umbrella. In the United States, we break things down by youth and young adult, and we do all this siloing, but the Synod references young people writ large. So that's why I'm using the language young people, so I want to just provide a little context for all my educators in the room. So the question is, how were young people involved in the process? So as part of the preparation for the Synod, Pope Francis called into play a number of preparatory activities to ensure that the voices of young people would be a very present part of this process at every step. And those included, but are not limited to, an online survey sent by the Vatican and replicated in many dioceses, so you may have seen this, your young people may have taken part in this, and that way feedback was received and answers directly given from young people themselves in a format that is intuitive to them as digital natives. Reports were submitted by the bishops' conferences from around the world, as well as preparatory documents prepared by the Office of the Synod. And then, of course, there are remarks that were given by the Holy Father directly to young people, whether they were at youth-specific events like World Youth Day or other opportunities where the Holy Father could address young people directly. And then the pre-synodal meeting, which is what I'm going to highlight in just a moment. It was a pretty interesting component of the preparatory process. Pope Francis called for a meeting of young adults from around the world to offer their voices to the conversation in a somewhat unprecedented way. That gathering would then be asked to compile a document of these responses to be used as a resource for those who would be going to the Synod in October 2018. Now, of course, I attended the pre-synodal meeting, so that's my context for speaking. So here are a few images from that week in Rome. I could not resist the opportunity to put up the picture where I met Pope Francis. And I should take this moment to say, I wanted to say that was the best day of my life. I also got engaged in 2018, so my fiance would be very unhappy if I did not say that was the second best day of my life. It was really a graced and sacred opportunity to attend that gathering, to get to interact with the Holy Father who spent a full day with us, and then to serve on the writing committee. I was asked to serve on the writing committee as we went through the whole process of the week, working in small language groups, taking those responses and comments and collating them into some document that would, in some capacity, represent young people from all around the world, which was this enormous task. And that was particularly profound for me because the authors of this document that the Synod would use were exclusively young people. How many official documents can say that from the Vatican? Of course, we were just one of the many puzzle pieces that led to the Synod itself. So we arrive at the Synod, fall 2018. Young people were also sent as delegates to the Synod itself, where they were able to engage in conversation, as Susan said, with the bishop delegates and provide interventions, that is, written statements read aloud in the synodal hall. And this was striking because it ensured that literally the voices of young people would be heard. And not just heard in general, but heard specifically by those bishops participating on their behalf at the Synod. So they got to speak on behalf of young people in their respective contexts. So from what I heard from friends who were young delegates or friends who were bishop delegates, it appears that the month spent in the synodal process in Rome was incredibly fruitful, not only for the work of the Synod itself, but also for the relationship between bishops and young people. They were able to spend an intimate period of time together, and in administering the life of a diocese, our bishops don't always have that opportunity to have that relationality one-on-one. So they were able to become more deeply acquainted with each other. I know so many bishops were profoundly moved by the stories they heard of young Christians persecuted in the Middle East, young women wrestling with their vocational identity in a church that does not appear to them to welcome them, and young adults in post-Christian areas of the world who are seeking accompaniment in a society which derides their faith. Storytelling, and more importantly, story listening, are critical for accompaniment, as we know, and the Synod created that atmosphere for a month. And the Synod did conclude, as all good Vatican gatherings do, with a final document, and I believe you have that here. And currently we are awaiting a response from the Holy Father in the form of an apostolic exhortation or some other such writing. So now the question is, why does this matter? We had a Synod. Why does that matter? The fact remains that most average Catholics have no idea what a Synod is or that one took place at all. And so it's easy for, some might say, Catholic nerds, or those of us who keep our finger on the pulse of these things, to feel like the work done during the entire process was so important. How could everyone not be as excited as we are about this? But it is humbling to acknowledge the world kept spinning, and I think we saw that right before the Synod as a lot of the sex abuse crisis rebroke in the United States. So this presents an opportunity for evangelization of sorts, to share the magnificence of the reality that young people from around the world came together to speak on behalf of their generation to an ancient institution that they do love. Those who were part of the process have the responsibility of sharing that with others, sharing the hope that was palpable, and to enter into conversation about the experience, not only about what is written in the documentation that arose from the synodal process, but about the experiences of young people in the church moving forward. So why does the Synod matter? It matters because it was inclusive. The Synod actually called together the topics of the conversation to be protagonists of the conversation, something that we're not always great at doing, right? We talk a lot about people and not always with people. And it created space which became the conduit for the views, needs, struggles, and dreams of young people. It's authentic to actually bring the people that you're talking about to the table and be part of the conversation, and invite them to help shape that conversation in a way that's faithful to their lived experience. And this is what Pope Francis did by asking young people to be present and part of the process at every turn, to have a hand in the ways that the church will hear, understand, and engage with them. It also matters because this stage of life matters. When we think about the period of being young, and I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir, you spend all day with young people, it is the time of greatest change, of self-discovery, and the definition of one's own identity. It's the time when vocation, in its truest sense, that is who God called you to be, your fullest, most authentic self, really blossoms. It's the time of growing up, that pesky frontal cortex finishes developing, and for many it can be an incredibly challenging time. Okay, for all of us, because who really would want to go back to being 15? You couldn't pay me to do it again. So how crucial it is that we as a church are thinking critically about how best to accompany young people through this time. And I love this quote. I pulled it from the Instrumentum Laboris, the working document. It's also in the final document with some slight turn of phrase. But the fact that Jesus Christ himself went through this particular stage means that it is sanctified. And that concept has just totally captivated me since I read it the first time around. And I got excited when I saw that it made it into the final document. I highlighted it, I circled it, I posted it because it just really spoke to me. That God chose to take on flesh and experience our humanity and did not choose to do so in what some of us might intuit as a logical choice, as a seasoned, wise older person, the seasoned saints, as my friends sometimes say, but instead from birth. He didn't even live to see 35. God entered among us as a young person. The meat, if you will, of the life of Christ is his adolescence and his young adulthood. That is the stage of youth, the stage of being young. So to me, that means we should hold that very reverently and tenderly and treat it as the sacred and joyful time that it is. And of course, it matters in this moment because this moment in the life of the church is critical. Each time I read or reread the documentation around the Synod or the articles or the blog posts or whatever things have come out of it, it becomes more and more evident to me that we need this moment in the life of the church now more than ever. In light of the recent sexual abuse crisis in the church in the United States and truly globally, there were many calls this summer for the Synod to be postponed, to focus on those very real and critical issues. And they said, we really need to focus on that. We should put the Synod on hold for a while. And I can understand why some might say that, but I vehemently disagreed. Not that the Holy Father asked me, obviously, it all continued. I'd like to think we were synced up, but maybe not. Now more than ever, we need to be shedding light on the experiences of young people, including their concerns about grappling with their faith identity and their relationship with the institutional church. We should not shy away from that. We need to critically examine how to respond. It's never going to get any better if we ignore and postpone and delay accompanying young people through that process. The time is now. So what's next in the synodal process? The Synod on Young People, the Faith, and Vocational Discernment is not simply a process that ended when they shut off the lights in the synodal hall and the document came out and it was done. It's not something that just fits in a neat box like that. Much like those movies whose final slide is not the end, but the beginning, just so with this process. The Synod itself is a working conversation, but the real work commences when everybody returns to their ministry, hopefully with renewed energy and fresh eyes, to consider how best to accompany young people on this journey. And the great news is you all already do that. This is yet another moment to exhort to you how critical, how crucial, how vital your ministries are to young people. You all are, in fact, on the front lines of this ministerial opportunity. It's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. Not only to accompany young people in general, which I am certain that you're doing, but to walk with them in this challenging but important period, both in their lives and in the lives of the life of the church. They need you, we need you, and we are so grateful for your continued yes. So be assured of my prayers for your ministry, because campus ministry changed lives, changed mine. Thank you very much.